quite frequently in the Gospels, we run across these passages that don't really make sense, and they look challenging, and we want to do something with them, but even taking them from first century context to 21st century context is a bit of a stretch. And I have seen way too many commentators and other preachers say, you know what, we've got other choices this week, go for one of them, it's easier. That unnerves me because I think we need to wrestle with text. So we're going to wrestle with this one today. The general title of this parable is The Dishonest Servant. One of the things that I came across as I was doing research about this and reading commentaries about this is that so often the scriptures that we have in English do not represent the words in Greek. And almost always, when you find a passage that's really difficult to understand, it's important to go back to the Greek if it's in the Christian scriptures, or back to the Hebrew if it's in the Hebrew scriptures, and to really find out what those words mean. Because let's face it, translating is a lot of work, and sometimes translators just get lazy. And they don't do all the work, or they work on scholarship that is old, because they want to get onto something that maybe is their pet project, spend more time on that. So they just repeat the stuff without any kind of acknowledgement that the word and context has changed over time. And I think that's what we've got going on here, is that the words have changed. So right away, the dishonest servant, we're prepped. Mostly in parables, we can very easily look at the characters and say, okay, this is supposed to represent God, this one's supposed to represent people. Or we have more frequently the case of each of these can represent an aspect of God. They each represent an aspect of humanity. We have to go in there and see what the nugget is, the core, the lesson that Jesus wants us to get. We don't have any of that to work with this particular scripture. And it's all about money, which is one of the hardest conversations you will ever have in any Christian community, because of the last verse in this passage, where you can't serve God and serve Mammon at the same time. We'll unpack that a little bit. But first, what is the story of the dishonest manager and what's going on here? Well, first of all, the English translation frequently says that that a bunch of people made a claim against this manager. Go back to the Greek, the word is slander. So right off the hop, we have gossip that we're dealing with. And Jesus is acknowledging that gossip sometimes gets in the way. So this is gossip about this manager who, and it wasn't that he was being necessarily dishonest with the people, but he was being a little bit cagey with the rich man, because this manager would have responsibility for all the books, all the accounts. The rich man probably didn't even know how much he was worth. He just counted on his managers and servants to do all of that. And so he started getting a little hinky, like what's going on with this particular manager? Because theft, as we saw last week when we talked about the reality of tax collectors, the managers and tax collectors, they weren't above putting a little bit of buffer above so they could collect the difference, and they would then increase their own wealth at the expense of the poor and in the complete blindness of those who were rich and hired them. So we have a situation where this manager was using the rich man's money to basically invest in a lot of things. Again, we need to go back to the Greek words in this and not just count on the English translations. So he was investing money here and there, essentially growing the rich man's wealth and probably his own in the process. And so when he's threatened with losing his job, he says he can't do any other work. He has to work this out. So he goes back to a number of people who owe money for the investments that he has managed to put into their business, into their land, into whatever it is that they were looking for money. And he says, okay, how much did you say, did I invest in you? And the guy, first of all, says 100 bushels. And he says, okay, we're going to knock it down to 50. It sounds like the manager's being dishonest, but I think it's more a case of, if we show that you owe less, then the rich guy will be a little more relaxed about it. And this goes on to a few people. The amount is knocked down. Now, some commentators think that might be him just taking his skim off the top out of the equation and dealing with the real deal. I don't know. Again, we got to come with what we can work with in here, because it's just a very, very confusing passage. So he does this, and then the rich man praises the manager for being so shrewd. And then Jesus talks about how great it is to have shrewd friends, because the people of this age, the children of this age, are more shrewd, more knowledgeable, more aware than the people of light. And then we get the kicker about you can't serve God and mammon. So the shrewd thing, it doesn't sound Jesus. Complimenting someone who is so aware of what's going on in the world that they're able to kind of play people off each other and get benefits and kind of hide their guilt, or maybe put off what their consequences might be. And that's what Jesus is praising? Weird. Just weird. And some great scholars actually use the word weird to try to get a better grasp of this particular story. I think what's happening here, and I've got a few people to back this up on, is that Jesus was savvy. We know Jesus was savvy. We see so much of that in some of his Gospels, in the stories he told. He could see through people really, really easily. And here he has saying the children of today who understand how to work the society, they are shrewder than the people who walk around as if they haven't done anything wrong, or that they walk around in complete confusion and, oh, I don't know how that works. People of the light, that naivete, that innocence that is so often associated with nuns and monks and people who pretend to live in the Christian community, as if it's supposed to be this kind of emotion-free utopia where everybody is so innocently interacting with each other. Jesus didn't seem to think that was what the world was like. He acknowledged the people who had a really good bead on the world, who understood the underhandedness, who understood how to get things done. He himself was not above putting someone in their place if they got out of line. And then the kicker, God and Mammon. So Mammon, we think, Mammona, was the Syrian god of wealth. So Jesus was not saying you can either have God or money. No, Jesus was saying you can focus on God or you can focus on wealth growth. This is very, very different. And this is where we get into trouble as Christians when we start to talk about money. I mean, one of the hardest things to place when you're making a service, doesn't matter who you are, the hardest thing to place is, where do you put the collection? Do you put it at the very beginning when people walk in? Like, oh, we're having our hands out now? Do you put it after the sermon? So, oh, we're having the hands out now, so you know what, pay us for the good entertainment? Where do we put it? It's not a comfortable place. But because the church is in this world, we have to have some form of financial collection so that we can pay our bills. Because we do not live in that light of that innocence where everything is provided. We live very much in the world where we have to pay bills and buy groceries and make sure repairs are happening and hopefully do mission along the way, because that's what we're called to do. It's not a matter of hating money. It's not a matter of thinking it's dirty and we don't want to have anything to do with it. I mean, Christian history has done that one too. It's a matter of how you use your money, how you use your wealth, the excess you have, how shrewd you are in your accumulation, and where it's going to go. We have seen with this recent pandemic that the rich have basically cooked the books. I mean, they always have, but they really, really cooked the books this time. And then a bunch of the really uber rich got caught up in this space race. That's mammon. That is obsessing about wealth, excluding everybody else. Jesus is talking about praising God, living God's life, following God's teaching. If we are people with means, if we're people with wealth, if we're people with money, we should be taking our excess and giving it to others, making things better for other people. It is not a matter of how you accumulate that. The shrewdness, Jesus kind of respected that, weird as that sounds. He did not expect humans to be naive little duckies who didn't challenge the world and were taken over by people who were smarter than they were, more conniving. That's not ever. Jesus never expected us to be dim-witted or innocent in our approach to things. Jesus did, however, expect us to use any extra we have, any bounty, to help others. That's the Christian world. It's not about keeping everyone poor, because Jesus wasn't poor to start with. He had a lot of rich people who were around him all the time who paid for his ministry. It was about how you use your wealth, how you use your abundance, how you bring the extra you have to the plate. Now, obviously, Jesus didn't want people to be exploited. That's pretty standard. But once you have what you have, use it to bring around God's world. Use it to help others. Use it to pay off debts for others. Use it rather than accumulate it. There is no value to added wealth. It's all a concept anyway, but there's incredible value to helping others. And that's where the punchline really, really comes home. Understanding the parable, I don't know if we ever will. Maybe we need Jesus to sit down with us and explain it exactly what he was talking about, because too many people don't grasp the concept. But how you use the money, that's clear. That is exactly how Jesus said for people to behave. We're not asking everybody to do without and have some kind of level of lacking around, because that's not helpful at all. But we are asking those who have more to contribute to those who have less. So we even the plane out. And that is how we serve God rather than Mammon.